All right, Ronan MMA, welcome back to the channel. Now, as many of you know, Jared Gordon was supposed to be fighting Jim Miller this last Saturday, and on very short notice, a little over 2 days, he had seemingly pulled out or was pulled from this fight. Now, there was no official statement made when the fight was changed to Jim Miller's short notice opponent, who he ended up absolutely starching. But Dana White was asked about it at the post-fight press conference, and he gave an answer that, in my opinion, was a little too harsh. I didn't like the way that he responded to this question, and I didn't like the fact that he was completely refusing to take any culpability or place any blame on the side of his matchmakers for matchmaking a guy who in all likelihood should have probably received a medical suspension after his fight with Bobby Green. Now, before we get into it, please like and subscribe. I would greatly appreciate it. We'll just get right into it. Okay, so Jared Gordon, obviously, horrible luck. Okay, horrible luck of Jared Gordon, but I do think that some of this is his fault. Okay, so he obviously, go back to the beginning, since Paddy Pimblett, right? He was robbed of the decision from Paddy Pimblett or from the judges while fighting Paddy Pimblett, which would have undoubtedly increased his marketability and or star power, even if it was just by a little bit, right? Paddy Pimblett had a ton of hype on him, and you go out there and you beat a guy with a ton of hype on him, you're gonna get some sort of rub. Now, after that, he was scheduled to fight Bobby Green, right? And he was looking very good in that opening round against Bobby Green. Bobby Green had landed a little bit more on him at the time of the finish, but he was landing good, clean shots on Bobby Green and did not appear to be getting stunned, rocked, or wobbled by anything that Bobby Green had to offer him. And then the nasty, nasty clash of heads that many people think was intentional on the side of Bobby Green happened. Okay, Jared Gordon gets dropped, put out cold by Bobby Green, who either didn't feel that they had clashed heads or didn't care and wanted to take advantage of the opportunity. Now, Jared Gordon, after the fact, obviously, okay, when you get knocked out, I think it's almost 100% that you have gotten a concussion, right? So I don't know if the UFC doctors didn't take a look at him after the fact, or he just didn't go to a doctor after the fact and he just said he was fine to the staff or whatever happened, right? But he goes home. He does an interview with Ariel Helwani that next Monday, just a few days later, or maybe it was a week later, but either way, very shortly after. And he says that he received a mild concussion, that he has mild concussion symptoms. For whatever reason, the matchmakers booked him to fight 6 weeks later. That's a month and a half, right? Now, typically, if a guy gets a concussion, he's receiving a 3 to 6 month medical suspension, depending on what state they are in. I thought it was a little strange that he was making that quick of a turnaround, and I think many others did, and that was why he was asked about it at Media Day, pre-UFC Fight Night, Car France versus Albazi. Now, when he was asked about it at that Media Day, at the media scrum, he said, well, yeah, they said, were you okay? This is kind of a quick turnaround, blah, 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 blah. He said, well, I had a mild concussion, you know what I mean? No big deal, I'm fine now, though, blah, 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 blah. And then he gets pulled from the card. And then after the fact, post UFC Fight Night, Car France versus Albazi, Dana White is asked about it, and he goes off on Jared Gordon. He says that he should have respected the company, and he should have respected his opponent, and he should have not accepted this fight. And he also should have gone to see a doctor, because he's not a doctor. How the fuck does he know whether or not he's got a concussion? And then the reporter attempted to follow up with a good question, or what would have been a good question had he been able to articulate himself properly, which was kind of like, well, do you place any blame on the matchmakers for this then? Because it was pretty obvious he got knocked out the last time he fought via a headbutt, by the way, or clash of heads. I don't want to say headbutt, as there's no real evidence that it was intentional. And he said no, that's all on him. He should have been diagnosed. Did a doctor diagnose him? Did he diagnose himself? Because he's not a fucking doctor. How the fuck are we supposed to know? Blah, blah. Motherfucker, he got knocked out from a fucking head. All right? At least put down by a clash of heads and then put out cold after the fact. Can somebody tell me when anybody has ever been knocked out that didn't experience mild concussion-like symptoms after the fact? And also, dude, this really triggered me because you know what, dude? I've had a lot of concussions, honestly. I've had probably 3 or 4, maybe even 5. I can't I lost count, probably because of all the concussions, okay? But the the main way a doctor diagnoses you with a concussion is based on the symptoms you explain to him, okay? And if you are a fighter who undoubtedly has had a concussion before, you don't need a fucking doctor to tell you whether or not you've got a concussion. You just don't, dude. There's no real like telltale signs that you would not be aware of that a doctor is able to see that would lead him to have a different conclusion than you. You know what I mean? Headache, nausea, dizziness, shit like this after the injury occurs for multiple days over, right? Like this is fucking, it's not rocket science, dude. You don't really need a doctor to diagnose you with a concussion. Especially not if you've had one before. You know what they are. You know what they feel like. I've been to a doctor for a concussion twice. The first one I ever got, okay? And the last one I ever got, because the last one I got was with a car accident, and I ended up smacking my head on the window real fucking hard because some guy backing out of his driveway, flooring it, didn't realize that I was parked at the edge of his driveway, and he fucking rammed into me. Not parked, I was stopped at a red light. Obviously I was supposed to be there, okay? He didn't look, he smashed into me, my fucking neck went waboosh, and I whacked my fucking head on the window hard, dude. Okay, so I went there just for like the ICBC portion, just so that I could say I had been to a doctor, this is what's happened, blah 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 blah. You don't really need a doctor to tell you whether or not you have a concussion, but what you do need to do as the matchmakers and as the CEO of the company is make sure that your guy is fucking okay. Okay? Now, the problem is that this is probably due to Jared Gordon's bad luck, but this just made it worse. I would imagine the reason why Jared Gordon didn't bother going to a doctor, didn't bother telling anybody, was because had he done so, he would have received a medical suspension. And in his last 2 fights, he has been robbed of half of his paycheck. And then do you think he wants to go sit out for another 3 to 6 fucking months over something that on average heals in 10 days? And I understand that the average person, the average population is not going and getting hit in the head for a living. So maybe you would expect or want at least a fighter to take a little bit more time off before going and getting hit in the head again. But on average, a concussion heals from about 7 to 14 days, if I'm not mistaken. Now, I've had one that lasted 3 weeks. That was the longest one that I've ever had, and it was very unfortunate. I would imagine Jared Gordon's probably lasted about 7 to 10 days. You know what I mean? It wasn't the worst one in the world. It was pretty bad, but it... Also, dude, does the UFC not have fucking doctors checking these guys out after the fight? You watched him get knocked out. Okay, you have doctors on staff that do stitches, that do all this shit. You don't have a doctor look at him and say, oh yeah, maybe he's got a concussion. Now, Jared Gordon could have maybe lied about symptoms, or maybe much like a car accident or something like that. Like, you've got adrenaline going on. You don't realize that the symptoms, sometimes you don't experience symptoms until a little later on. Now, if Jared Gordon gets knocked out, gets woken up, he's still a little fucking buzzed from the fact that he was just in a fight, and he doesn't realize that he's got a bad headache, or he's dizzy, or he's nauseous, or any of this shit. He's sensitive to light, right? Things like this. And maybe he just tells the doctor, yeah, I'm fine. But I think it's pretty fucking standard for guys to get a medical suspension after they've been KO'd. Israel Adesanya was given a medical suspension after he got TKO'd standing against Alex Pereira. Why was Jared Gordon not given a medical suspension and then booked by your matchmakers 6 weeks later, when he openly admitted on one of the biggest MMA shows that exists on YouTube, on Ariel Helwani's show, that he in fact had a mild concussion? His symptoms were feeling a little bit better. Also, dude, fuck, Dana White pissed me off with this shit. He said, what, did you fucking heal yourself from a concussion? As if there's any fucking treatment plan. It's not a broken bone, retard. He didn't make his own cast and fucking fix it. He didn't reset his own bone. He didn't have to do anything like this. He didn't have a torn ACL that he thinks he did some fucking witchcraft with and was able to push it back together and hold it there long enough till it glued itself. Like, it's a concussion, fuckface. What are you supposed to do? What would a doctor do What would a doctor do that's any different than what you would do? If you have a concussion, what do you do? Take it easy. Maybe chill out in a dark room for a little bit. Like, don't focus on the TV too much. Fucking, if your neck's hurting, ice. You know what I mean? Shit like this. Advil, Tylenol. Like, what the fuck, dude? He healed himself, he said. He was making fun of that as if that's like out of the. If you were to go see a doctor, he would literally tell you, hey, take it easy. You know what I mean? Dark rooms, stay away from bright lights, maybe don't drive. Also, do you need some of these? Like, because they're in the States, I don't know, maybe he would get offered opiates. Now, Jared Gordon is a recovering drug addict, so I would imagine he would say no to those, and that's probably why he didn't go to a fucking doctor. Maybe he didn't want to be tempted with a painkiller prescription, okay? But just because I do blame the matchmakers and I do blame Dana White, that doesn't mean they get all the blame. Jared Gordon should have kept his fucking mouth shut. But the only thing is that he said it like immediately after. I feel like there's no chance, there's no way in fucking hell that not a single person at the UFC got wind of this after he spoke about it on Ariel Helwani's show. Ariel Helwani's show gets a ton of views. And I know that Dana White doesn't like Ariel Helwani, but I would imagine that they probably have somebody that watches his shit so that they can like create counter narratives and whatever to anti-UFC propaganda that is Ariel Helwani. It's so unfortunate, man. And then to get dragged through the fucking mud by your boss after the fact, that makes me think that like Jared Gordon's career is fucked in the UFC. And he is going to just get handed horrible matchups for him so that we never get to see a Paddy Pimblett Jared Gordon rematch or anything. Which, I mean, honestly, dude, I don't really fucking need to. But it just sucks that he got fucked. And ever since then, he's been getting more and more fucked. I think that this blame is like 50-50. If I was Jared Gordon, I would have kept my fucking mouth shut. Yeah, I'm fine, dude. Because 6 weeks later, most likely, 99.9% of the time, after a mild concussion, you are fucking fine. That is what it is. There's two reasons why he wouldn't have told the doctor. He wouldn't have wanted a medical suspension. He didn't want to get tempted with painkillers. That's it. He was a heroin addict. You know what I mean? Certain states, you go to a doctor for a fucking concussion, you walk away with fucking Percocet or something. I don't know what they give you, but I know that it's easy to get painkillers there. Like, fuck, man. And then now this guy's career is like over. Almost. You know what I mean? Like, he's now on a skid against guys that aren't even ranked. You know what I mean? And it's just so shitty, dude. And I really didn't like the way Dana White responded to this. I don't give Dana White a ton of shit for a ton of stuff, but I don't like the way that he responded to that. And I think that he's trying to do damage control for his own self, for his matchmakers, for his company, to make it seem as though, well, why we didn't fucking know. But yeah, right, dude. Yeah, right. You just thought it wasn't going to get brought up. It wasn't going to get talked about the way that it did. And then when Jared Gordon flat out said, you know, a month and a half ago, I had a concussion, they thought, well, fuck, now we can't let you fight. You would have kept your mouth shut. We would have let you fight. You know what I mean? And we handed you a decent opponent, a decent matchup, a guy who's way older, right? Maybe you can get a win here because you've had some bad luck lately. And then he goes and opens his fucking mouth, dude. Jared Gordon, what are you doing? Why'd you do that, dude? But also, fuck those guys, man. I can't get over the did you heal yourself? He was literally saying that in like a mocking tone. Like, yeah, I did. What do you mean? There's nothing a doctor can do for a concussion. Literally not a thing. Not a thing. And if you've never had one before, maybe he can give you the recommendation on what to do. But the treatment plan is like solely based and reliant upon you. You literally are the one that heals yourself of a concussion fucking 100 times out of 101. You know what I mean? Unless you've got brain bleeding or something like that. But that's more than a concussion. That's hemorrhaging. You're going to fucking die. Get to a hospital. You know what I mean? Frustrating, man. Very frustrating. And I feel for Jared Gordon. I wish he would have kept his mouth shut. But I do feel for him. But I also think that some blame should be levied on the UFC and their matchmakers because they should have known. It was out there in the ether less than a week after, maybe a week after at most, on the Ariel Helwani show. Yeah, I had a mild concussion. I'm starting to get better already. It must have been the week after. So 10 days, right? Saturday to Monday and then to Monday again. So He was already talking about how he was feeling better. This is why he doesn't go to a doctor. You know what I mean? This is why it's very unfortunate. I don't usually talk shit about fighter pay either, but the win bonus model is kind of shitty because you see a guy in Jared Gordon get, and we just saw this with Kai Kara France versus Amir Albazi. Kai Kara France said that fight cost me $100,000. So those two judges that scored that against him, fucking unjustifiably so, Sal D'Amato and Derek, not Derek, yeah, Derek clearly, took Kai Kara France's $100,000 six-figure check, cut it in half. They did the same thing to Jared Gordon, and then Bobby Green did the same thing to both of them. Because he could have just backed off, you know what I mean? Yeah, I dropped him. We clashed heads. He dropped. I'll just wait for him to recover. Like, you know what I mean? You had to pounce on him. And then he gets fucking KO'd. And then the last thing he wants to hear after getting two paychecks cut in half is a doctor tell him, you can't work for 6 months. You know what I mean? Anyways, dude, I want to know what you guys think about this situation. I want to know if you think it was fair that Dana White pulled him from the card, if you think that Dana White and the matchmakers are to blame, or if you think Jared Gordon should have kept his fucking mouth shut. Any which way, let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. I would greatly appreciate it if you could like and subscribe. I'll see you at the next video. Bye-bye.